right. Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to our latest episode. Again, for those who don't remember, my name is Roddy, and I moved to Mexico with my wife, Landy, and our son, Louis, in 2021. We called Querétaro home for 2 years, but now we live in Mexico City. And today, we have two guests with us, and we're going to be talking, a little bit about life in Mexico, traveling, rehabbing a house, right? The LGBTQ experience, and I'm sure a lot more different things as the conversation goes on. But first, I'd like my guests to introduce themselves. So, Zac.
Great. Hi, I'm Zac Campbell. What else should I say?
Background.
53-year-old retired chef, event planner, and general entrepreneur. I've lived in 7 countries, if you include Texas. I've had 33 addresses, and this new house that we're in process of finishing will be my 34th home in my life. So
hopefully the last.
Probably not the last, but one of the last. Yes. Yeah. So I lived in. This is my second time in Mexico. I lived in Puerto Vallarta for almost 10 years prior to moving to Dallas. 12 years in Dallas, and then moved here to Mexico City almost 2 years ago. A year and a half ago.
Year and a half.
Nice.
Yeah, 18 months ago. Came down actually with a job, and quickly realized that job was not going to work, and resigned, and have kind of been reinventing myself this year, figuring out what the next steps are for me in my life, all while remodeling a home, which you get to see later. And it's more than a renovation. It is a full down to the years of
cement.
Yeah.
Wow.
Years of tile buildup from previous remodels.
Just kind of layered on top of each other.
It looked like an excavation site. It was like, this was built in 1973. So
yeah, because here you don't say down to the studs, right? Because
there are the studs. So exactly. I was going to say, what do you say instead of down to the studs? Down to the first layer of cement, the original layer of cement.
Nice.
So that's what I do. Love living in Mexico City. Wanted to live here for a long time. My mother actually lives here as well. She is a almost 81-year-old single woman who lives in Roma Norte, and she loves it as well.
Nice.
So it's kind of weird that I have more family here than I did in Texas.
That's true.
So that's it. That's who I am.
Thank you, Zac. John?
John Rogers, originally from Denver, Colorado, but lived most of my life in Dallas, Texas. I was a lawyer there for the city of Dallas for 30 years, and I'm retired now,
Okay.
and love Mexico.
Nice. Retired from what, if I may ask?
Oh, I was a lawyer
Lawyer.
for the city of Dallas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I did mostly land use development, real estate, historic preservation, but I did everything. But by the time I was done, I was the chair of the ethics committee, and
He put Dallas on the map to becoming the cool city that it is today.
And as we kind of go along, I know some of these questions they're obviously going to be for both of y'all, but so hopefully we don't repeat too much. My first question is, so what kind of brought you to Mexico? I know you said you've been here before. This is your first time to Mexico to move and live?
To live, yes, for sure.
So what brought you down here to Mexico, and up to this point, what has been your experience in Mexico City?
Wow. So first question, what brought us here? Well, I'm retired, so I don't have, I could live anywhere I want.
Sure.
Right? So when I met him, he doesn't like Dallas, and he wanted to move, and he said we could either go to LA or to Mexico City, and I don't like LA at all, because, sorry if you're from LA, it's too car oriented. I don't like riding in cars. I don't like driving cars. It just doesn't appeal to me at all. But Mexico City, I've been coming down here, multiple times because it's so close and easy from Dallas, and it's such a great city, and I kind of had fallen in love with it. So I said, sure, let's move to Mexico. Let's do it.
Nice. And it was just pretty much as simple as that? I'm just like, let's go.
It pretty much was that simple, yeah. It was more figuring out what we needed to do. And we had decided to do this right before, we were seriously contemplating it right before COVID.
Okay.
I actually had my 50th birthday here, which was in 2020. February 15th of 2020, in fact, was the party. And then we all know what happened 2 weeks later when the world shut down.
Yep. Oh yeah.
So that kind of delayed our move down here. But yes, you would say.
You were asking like what motivated us to move here.
Mhm.
It's undeniable that one factor was the messed up politics of the U.S.
Sure. Yeah.
I just don't want to participate in that anymore. It's so insane and so dysfunctional.
Yeah.
I just don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I can definitely agree and associate with that because you're right. It's just, and I think social media drives a lot of that, and I'd rather just remove myself from that. And the easiest way is just go to another country where you still run into them here and there. When I'm sure you go to functions and stuff, but definitely not on the level as back home.
Not a constant daily.
Yeah.
Right. And I think
barrage
you're not there's not a barrage of content being thrown at you as
Right.
much, and you have more control over what you participate in and what you don't. I'm active in Democrats Abroad. John's not so much, but he did his years of that, right? And so for me, it's important as an expat to continue that. My mother's also actively involved. So for us, but you really get to choose. You don't have to be get sucked into all the drama. You can choose when you want to participate and when you don't, which is really
Take a step back, right?
Exactly. And give yourself some space, which I think we all need after these last 8 years.
Yeah.
You can tell we're huge Trump fans.
Oh yeah. And so, kind of going back to the question as far as what brought you. I know we talked about Mexico City. What took you to Puerto Vallarta?
Literally, so I was living in Seattle at the time. There had been a slight economic downturn, and my former partner and I decided we were going to leave Seattle.
Okay.
And we were looking at different places. We were seriously contemplating San Diego because that's as close to Mexico as you can be while still being in the U.S. And then we spent the summer in Vallarta and fell in love. And for me, it's really more about a quality of life decision, and it's more in line with the priorities that I have. I found, even though I am American, I've lived out of the States more than I've lived in the States my entire life, and I just prefer the focus of life to be about friends and family and less about career. The first question people in the States ask when you meet someone is, well, what do you do for a living?
Sure.
And here I have friends I'm still not, and I've known for years, and I kind of know what they do, but I don't really know what they do.
You maybe have an idea?
Yeah, they're in the medical field somewhere. But
your career doesn't define you. Here.
Exactly.
In the U.S., your career is who you are.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. On a much higher level, I'm sure.
Yeah. And Mexico City is a big, bustling city with a lot of very professional, successful people. Some of the richest people in the world live in the city.
Yeah.
However, the focus is more about what the money, what success provides you and your family and your friends, rather than it defining you.
Sure. Right.
So for me, it's more, the priorities are more in line with how I grew up and how I wish to live my life.
Right. And so, what has kind of been the experience up to this point? So obviously we know why you came to Mexico City.
Mm-hmm.
But how would you define the experience up to this point? Just your daily life, out, functionings, whatever.
I figured I would love it, but I was surprised how much I love it here.
Oh, okay.
It's like paradise here. I mean, it's just like every single aspect of Mexico and Mexico City is perfect. And the surprising thing to me that I didn't, wasn't aware of, it's the best thing about living here is the people. The Mexicans are so nice, and so polite and so friendly, and just wonderful. Like every day in the U.S., you run into someone that you would consider to be an asshole.
Sure.
Right? Here, I really, we've been here a year and a half, and in a year and a half, I've not had one unpleasant interaction with anyone.
That's nice.
Yeah, everybody here is super, super nice.
Nice.
So that's kind of the biggest thing
Perfect.
for me. But the other big thing is the climate in Mexico City.
Yes.
Dallas gets scorchy hot in the summer,
Yeah.
but here it's pretty, the weather is pretty much the same year round. It has a little bit colder and a little
Like
bit
now.
hotter. Not much, not significantly.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to that completely. I haven't been here in the summer yet. Ooh. But I did come here. Oh,
Harvey,
say hi.
Get down. Get down. Get out of the camera. Thank you.
The first time we traveled here, which was before we lived in Mexico, we actually came to Mexico City in, I forgot if it was July or August.
Mhm.
And again, hot, but much more bearable than Texas hot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
so-
nothing near Texas.
No. You break a little sweat, you're like, oh, okay, but I mean, like I said, coming from the border and from Houston, I definitely understand Dallas. Yeah, it's a totally different level in Texas. How about yourself? How would you say your experience has been here so far?
Amazing. I mean, when I first got here, I was super busy because I was building a new division for a company. But my team that I worked with, everyone was just so accommodating and so lovely and just really, really supportive. And I would say the difference, there's a very big difference between Mexico City, living in Mexico City, and living in Puerto Vallarta. Puerto Vallarta was much, even though it's grown, it's still a small town. And it has a lot of small town mentality. Mexico City is like living, in the level of sophistication here is like living in New York or Rome or London or Paris or anywhere like that.
Right.
And the smaller towns don't necessarily have that. So if people are considering where they might move, that's one consideration to have, is what is important to you.
Sure.
Do you want small town? Do you want 24 million people? It's really depends on what you want.
Right.
And for me, Mexico City, and I didn't really realize this until we moved here and lived here for a while, it's the first city that I have felt at home in since I left Japan. And Tokyo is a city that is now apparently 30 million people. So I wouldn't be surprised when I was there in the 80s, but it's a big city and a big city vibe. But what comes with that is, amazing cultural events, fashion, art, food. I mean, the food scene in the city is just insane, especially as a chef, but also just as a eater, as a consumer of food. It's amazing. Cocktails. I mean, we've got some of the best restaurants and bars literally in the world. Michelin is now here as of 2 months ago. So
that recent?
Yeah, it's very new.
Wow.
And just the fact that that's here now and part of the culture, it's kind of creating another sense of healthy competitiveness. But the food scene here is very supportive and very creative, and really they just support each other. But it's a great city for art and entertainment. And
for sure.
That. Yeah.
Now, one of the little questions I like to throw in there. Y'all like street food?
Love it.
Okay. Besides tacos, favorite street food? I know it's a hard one.
I would say gorditas. I really like gorditas. I love the esquites. I like those. Elotes, esquites. Tacos al pastor. I always like those.
He knows right where to go. That one's fine.
Did you take that away?
Best street food. It's so hard because it's all so good.
It is also good.
Pozole. I love pozole.
I would add tortas. I'm a huge torta fan. I would also add some of the newer trends, which is really interesting. Right down the street from us, there was like a sushi place. It was all rolled sushi.
Okay.
But there was one on the street corner. And the other day we were going to Norte, and I walked by a banh mi, a Vietnamese banh mi stand, and I was like, okay, we're coming back here. Gotta try that. So it's really cool just to see kind of how something that is so traditionally Mexican is now starting to embrace like global cuisine,
right?
As something as homey as the street stalls. I mean, so it's amazing. Everyone has a new shtick here. Like there's always a new something.
We have a friend that he has a puesto, and he does vegan, Middle Eastern and Indian food.
On the street or in the restaurant? Oh, nice.
Yeah, comida corrida, no?
Yeah, no, it's a puesto.
Oh, it is. Okay, cool.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I mean, there's just so much good food. And then just real quick, going back to esquites and elote, just in case anybody doesn't know what that is, what is that?
Well,
I know what it is.
In Texas, it's all elotes, whether it's on the cob or in a cup.
Right.
Here they make a distinction. The cob is the elotes and the cup is esquites.
Right.
Yeah. Well, so what is this?
Yeah, what is it?
Oh, it's corn taken off the cob in a cup with butter, chili powder, lime, mayonnaise, which I don't like the mayonnaise, And is that
Chili powder usually?
Chili
Yeah,
powder,
lime maybe?
yeah,
Yeah.
butter,
yeah.
lard, chili powder.
Mhm.
So it's just a bunch of deliciousness in a cup with corn.
Super
It's
yummy.
really, really
That's great. Now, we talked a little bit about, what brought you here and some of the things that we like, what brought you here. But on the flip side, because
What do we dislike?
what do we dislike about Mexico City?
I would say there's only one thing that I dislike about Mexico City. It's the traffic is horrific.
Yep.
And I don't drive, and so it doesn't bother me that much. But the impact of the horrific traffic is there are many, many intersections here where it is really dangerous for pedestrians to cross the street.
Oh, sure.
That's the only thing that I wish was different in Mexico City. I wish it was safer for pedestrians to cross streets.
Sure. I think sometimes you have to just kind of be brave and just walk
dash
and hope they stop.
So when I have people come here, I always tell them, I said, just because you have a walk light does not mean that it's safe.
No,
you
no.
have to book and make actual sure that it's actually safe for you to cross.
Oh, yeah.
Especially motorcycles.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I've noticed, and it's kind of starting to bother me more for some reason, I notice buses run lights a lot. I don't know if they have in this area, like those little, like the green buses.
The
Yeah.
motorcycles run them.
Yeah.
My Uber drivers, my Uber driver the other day just was repeatedly running through red lights.
Oh, yeah.
It's definitely
it's crazy.
It's definitely a city that you have to just kind of give up the perception that you have any control when you are a passenger in a car and just breathe and pray. If you pray, great. If you don't pray anyway.
It might help.
It might help.
Would you agree with that? I mean, is traffic one of the things you dislike most, or is something else you might add?
Traffic is not the highest dislike for me, primarily because I've grown up in cities that have horrendous traffic. I learned how to drive in Tokyo and New York, so I mean, it's like I'm used to that. I don't love it, but I'm fine with it.
Sure.
I think here the biggest challenge I have is when I get into my very American mode, and that is when say I'm ordering online from using an app, ordering a service, right? So you think, okay, great, it says it's going to be there in 45 minutes. And 3 hours later, you're sitting there, having a conversation with customer service, and they're like, oh, we can't help you with that. I'm like, well, why?
Yeah. Isn't that your job?
Isn't that your job to help you with that? So there's those kinds of frustrations, but really for me, there are...
That's not a fault with Mexico. That's a fault with being an American.
No, it is a fault with Mexico in the sense that, if you have a service, I think the expectation, or maybe it is American, I don't know, whatever. But the expectation is that it's going to get completed in the time they say.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily happen.
No.
But then on the flip side, like medical care here is so phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like literally the doctor, my mom had some stuff done and in the States you'd be in and out and done.
Right.
Here, the doctor showed up at her house because he was in the neighborhood and knocked on the door and just to say, hey, how you doing? How you feeling? You
Right.
good? All right, awesome. Have a great day. Bye. There wasn't a charge. I mean, it was just pure compassion for their clients, right? So there's things here that really balance out any of the quote unquote negatives.
Sure.
The thing that probably is the hardest for North America, the rest of North Americans, Canadians, and Americans, is understanding understanding the realities of a classist society.
Okay.
The U.S. has classes, obviously,
Sure.
but here it is much more pronounced. But also at the same time, there is a respect, and as a gringo, you have to learn how to navigate that in a way that's respectful, but also a way that protects you from putting yourself in a situation that may not be ideal.
Okay. Now, what do you mean by protecting yourself? Just because I know people who may be coming here, they may not have experienced something like this.
Right. I'll give a perfect example. We first moved here. We had a wonderful housekeeper that was here from day one with us. She came twice a week, and we became very, very familiar. She became part of the family.
Sure.
And I've been around this long enough to know that's not what I should have been doing, because she became too familiar. The roles between employer, employee kind of got a little bit blurred.
Sure.
And as a result, an unfortunate situation happened where she stole from us and had to terminate her contract. And I think we could have avoided that if we had been more respectful of not crossing that line. So understanding where the line is and being sure you're not crossing it. And I see that happen with a lot of foreigners, especially people who aren't used to having home, help in the home or anything like that. And because it's so much more common here, because it's far more affordable than it would be in the US.
Right.
So really understanding that. And so there's a tremendous amount of respect, but it's important to respect the different classes here and know who you are and where you fit into that. Doesn't mean you have to turn into, a pretentious, demanding person, but just having that cultural awareness that it is a different culture.
Right.
And we have, as guests in this country, we have to be aware of that and be responsible for that.
Just be able to kind of draw a line, have that distinction, right? Again, you want to being friendly, but not too familiar, right? To where I'm sure it becomes a difficult situation, and maybe that's why she felt comfortable. She could have talked her way out of it. I'm making some assumptions here, but
I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with you at all, and I think it, the way we ended it had to be. She was shocked, like she wasn't prepared for what we did. But I've done business here for years, and I know how to do it, and it was very quick and painful, but quick.
Sure.
For everyone involved.
No, definitely understand that. And that's something that's definitely is a new point that hasn't been brought up in some of our other interviews. So that's an interesting point, for people who may want to consider moving here, is to understand those differences, which is a nice point.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things you had mentioned, when we first kind of started messaging, again, I have to read it because to make sure I get it right. It says, one of the things you are is you're passionate about providing people with an alternative to the grind in the reset of North America and beyond. I was just curious. that statement kind of stood out. What do you mean by that?
So I think a lot of Americans, specifically referring to people that we knew in Dallas, when we said we were moving here, it was so out of their reality. They couldn't, their minds were just blown because they've been so used to living life in one specific way that it's not that they're not willing to, they just have never entertained a possible other way of living.
Sure.
So for me and for us, I would speak for John on this too, it's kind of showing people there are alternatives to living the American grind.
Right.
The American dream that I consider to be dead, and I know a lot of other people consider it to be dead, or not worth it anymore, either way. There's life outside of the United States, and I think it's so important for people to travel. They start to get the bug that way, and then all of a sudden they meet people like us, and they're like, "Oh, you live here? Like, how did you do that? Or how did you move to Shanghai? How did you, whatever your situation is?" And they start seeing that there are other realities that they can choose if it's a fit for them.
Right.
It's not a fit for everyone.
No, not at all.
Being an expat is not a fit for everybody. But for those that have that opportunity, I like to show them that opportunity as an option. And if they choose to take that on, great. If they choose not to, more power to them.
Sure. So would you agree with that?
Yeah. When we told people we were moving down here, and even now, when I talk to people in Dallas, the first question I always ask, is it safe?
Oh, yeah. Number one.
I hate that. I just want to slap people for asking that. I mean, they don't know.
Right.
But Mexico City is, I feel like, completely safe here.
Right.
I walk anywhere, anytime. I've never had any problem. I've never felt insecure at all. And in America, I feel unsafe all the time.
True.
Because anytime you go to any public place, a concert, a school, a grocery store, you could be shot and killed without any advance notice.
Sure.
Like some nut job walks in there with a gun, and everyone has guns.
Right.
And you get killed.
Right.
So I don't feel safe in America, but I do feel safe here.
Right.
Very safe.
Right. But I think we have to take into consideration maybe in the areas that we live in, myself, we are in a little bit of a bubble. Because to say that Mexico is completely safe is not right. But I definitely feel safe in these areas. I will agree with that 100%. Yeah. And again, coming from Houston, there's some areas where you think you should feel safe, and something happens, right? And it's a little bit of a weird.
Right before we left Dallas, and we lived in an area in Dallas. It's a beautiful area on one of the nicest streets in Dallas, and there was drive-by shooting. And the next day we had a building fish fry, And this woman was just horrified that we were moving to Mexico City because we weren't going to be safe. And I said, "Did you hear the gunshots yesterday on Elstree Boulevard?"
In front of your house.
Yeah. So I think, yes, Mexico City, and again, to emphasize, we do live in, like, there's 7 neighborhoods that most foreigners and Mexicans live in, wealthier Mexicans live in this city that is very, that is much on the safer side. That has changed. 20 years ago, 5 blocks from where we live now was not safe. And after the sun went down, you would not want to be in Centro. But because of the efforts of Carlos Slim and the current president of Mexico, who was the mayor at the time, they started the city on a track of becoming a much safer place to be. And there's a lot of respect for that, and there's a lot of honoring that. And it's a big city, right? So you've got to be careful. You have to have your eyes open. But overall, it is one of the safe. I feel completely safe here. As I said, my almost 81-year-old mother lives by herself. It's not a. We don't walk on the street and feel concerned. Even at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, like walking down Reforma, you feel fine.
Oh yeah. Reforma is very nice. This area. I mean, again, overall, I definitely feel safe in these areas. So I would agree with that statement for sure. It's much safer than I think the perception people have back home. For sure.
Absolutely. For sure.
And that has to do with just the way Mexico has been, as a country, has been perceived and covered by the press for years.
Oh, right.
So it's not. There's some truth, and there's parts of this country I will not go to. There's parts of this country that I have Mexican friends that will not go to. It really depends on where you are.
It's safe in a different way too. Is that, like, when I'm out walking around, and I walk a lot around, like, for hours and hours and hours, almost every day. When you're out walking around, if something were to happen to you, if I fell and broke my arm or something happened, people around you will immediately rush up and help you, like, without hesitation.
Right.
I don't think that happens quite that much in the U.S. Like,
probably
people
not.
aren't like eager to come help you, but here, I just feel like if something went wrong, people would help you.
Right.
There's a much stronger sense of community, I would say, and you feel that here. Even as a foreigner, you definitely feel that.
I think that's it. Yeah, I think it's built into the culture. I mean, we've talked about this, my wife and I and other people, that it's in the Mexican culture that's definitely kind of built in, that family culture, helping people out. And again, so you see it portrayed, when you're on the streets or if something bad happens, you tend to see it a little bit more here. Again, obviously you can't see it back home, but I think there is that little bit of sense of uneasiness to do something like that back home. It's kind of like, I need to protect myself and my own first. But I mean, obviously I've been through like things like Harvey, and which was a big event in Houston, and again, and there was definitely a big reaching out of the community and people, but that's a very special event, as compared to just your daily life.
It has to be almost catastrophic in order for people to move into that space. Here, you've got people. You have elderly people that are, don't have any money, and they're selling chocolate or candies on the street. And it's just really lovely to see when someone walks by, and even if they say no, it's a polite no.
Sure.
It's not like, who are you? You just crap on the street.
It's always like, no, thank you.
Yeah, it's a, pardon, disculpe, pardon me, but no, thank you.
Right.
It's like, it's so polite and genuine, and genuinely, and I think people do tend to take care of each other more here than they do in the States. People that you don't know.
Sure. I think I would agree with that statement as well. And so we started talking about like areas we wouldn't move to, not move to, maybe wouldn't travel to or visit. So I know, kind of moving on, you talked about you've kind of traveled around Mexico quite a bit. So what would you say, briefly? Let's kind of start with where have y'all traveled to, particularly cities, states?
Do you want a list?
Let's start with a brief list, and then we'll get into maybe some more details.
We're in the process of trying to go lots of places in Mexico to be familiar with our new country.
Sure.
So we've been to Puebla, Cuernavaca, Zipolite, Oaxaca, Puerto Vallarta. Where else have we been? Guadalajara.
All of the wine country.
Guanajuato, Baja.
San Miguel. Monterrey. He was just there. Where else have we been? That's, I think, it for so far.
Okay. So pretty good list.
Yeah, and that's just been in the last year.
Everything.
That's been in the last year.
Nice.
Yeah, we typically travel once a month.
We're going to Acapulco.
Yeah, we're going to Acapulco.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
How is that as far as you've heard? Because I know are they still recovering from the hurricane?
Oh my God.
Right.
Unfortunately, the coverage hasn't been great. Otis destroyed Acapulco.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a disaster. Again, people are really stepping up and helping, but we're going to a friend's home. We'll probably not leave their house much, other than to kind of go check things out. I'm doing a fundraiser. We're actually co-hosting a fundraiser in January to raise money to donate to an organization in Acapulco. So that's part of the reason why we're going. And we've never been before, so I want to see what it's like when it's not at its best, and then go back and it's recovered.
Built up.
Yeah, but it was really devastated. It's really, really bad. It's really bad. I mean, people are not eating and they've lost their homes, and
I know the initial coverage was terrible, and you could, the video and pictures that were coming out were very desperate situations. I mean, I know it's been months. I don't know exactly how long it's been, but 2 months. So
2 months and a half, 2 months.
So it's still pretty bad.
But they're still struggling a lot. But again, it's, this country is used to hurricanes and earthquake damage, and the communities really, really come together in a way that is quite miraculous.
Nice. So, and with all those places that you've traveled to, and again, we can get 2 lists here, and we'll try to keep it. If you were to give like maybe top 3 places that have been your favorite places to travel or love.
One I'm not going to say because I don't want anyone else to know.
Okay, so we got one.
I know what he's going to say.
So that one, we'll keep one secret, and it'll be like 1B or 1A.
My little private secret, but it's not so secret anymore. I would say I personally spent a lot of time in San Miguel. I had business there, and I've always loved San Miguel. I've loved it for the last 25 years. It's a magical place. It's become very gringofied. But it still has a magical charm, and some of the things that are happening in that city are pretty cool. They're pretty cool, and the connection between the U.S., Americans, and Mexicans, and what they're doing together to build community, but also completely new and different things. And it's becoming like this major design center in Mexico, which is phenomenal. I mean, it's this little artist town that now has an international presence.
And it's so close and easy from Mexico City.
Yeah, it's 3.5 hours from Mexico City, and it's like you're in a different world. I mean, it's beautiful. Other than that, I love Guadalajara. I think Guadalajara is a great city. It's not somewhere I would personally like to live because it's much more car dependent than Mexico City, but it's a great city. I equate it a little bit more to like living in Los Angeles in a sense. Or Mexico City, I would equate to living in. I always say Mexico City is like having a baby. If Rome and Manhattan had a baby, it would be Mexico City. Zipolite, that's my secret spot that I'm not telling anyone about. Is on the coast of Oaxaca. It's a small little beach town.
Puerto Escondido.
In that area?
Yeah. You typically fly into Puerto Escondido or Huatulco. And just some of the most beautiful, picturesque beach towns, and not developed like Cancun or Vallarta or anywhere like that. So they're tiny. It's not somewhere I could live full time, but it was a great place just to literally unplug and and chill out. I mean, it's just the food is amazing, the people are amazing. It's just so relaxed. Like putting flip-flops on is getting dressed up. It's wonderful, especially compared to, it's a much more relaxed environment. Other than that, there's so much more Mexico that we want to see and travel. Copper Canyon, I've not been there yet. There's a lot of places Taxco, we're going.
That's relatively close to you, right? Taxco, that's what I'm thinking of? Right. That's it has like the white and red tile roofs. Is that what I'm thinking of? Is that in the right area?
It's famous for, Taxco is like the big silver producing town of Mexico. So they still have like a lot of silver there.
Yeah,
so it's claim to fame.
For jewelry lover Spratling, I can't think of his first name right now. He's a very famous American jewelry designer from the 30s and 40s. Maybe. Kind of, don't quote me, but he really put Taxco on the international map and really created some pieces that are in museums and stuff. So it's a really interesting town that I want to go to. I haven't been there yet.
Nice.
Wine country here is amazing. In Baja California, the wines are amazing. The the food, the gastronomy there is just phenomenal. Tijuana, like all that, some of the best food in the country.
Oh, yeah. I've also been we've been to almost all of the border towns, like
really?
Tijuana and the Texas one, Matamoros and Juarez and.
Okay.
Not places I would think of a lot.
I don't think of places as being Mexican. I mean, they are Mexican.
Sure.
But I don't think of them as Mexico. They're more like
blended,
weird suburbs of the U.S.
Right. Well, I mean, I can definitely relate because I lived on the other side. So people like, from Texas, other parts of Texas who know the Valley would always joke that that's not really, Texas. That's Mexico. Just how here they think, Matamoros, Reynosa, that's really Mexico. That's right.
Yeah.
It's kind of this weird, blending of cultures right there, which makes it an interesting place. But it's definitely a little bit different there.
Yeah.
And so, would you agree with his three, or do you have maybe three spots that you kind of prefer that would be your top three?
My top three would be, number one would be Zipulite.
Nice.
For sure. Love that one. San Miguel. And Guanajuato, I guess. Or Guanajuato.
Guanajuato is beautiful.
Sure, yeah.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
All right, so almost the same, just maybe different orders. And so just like we asked about Mexico, now we talked about our favorite places. Was there a place that you'd be like, maybe you were underwhelmed, that's not maybe, or just didn't like, or underwhelmed by the visit?
Wow. No, I can't think of a place I wouldn't go to a second time.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the only place that is even remotely somewhere where I don't love is Sayulita, which is outside of Puerto Vallarta, because it grew. Well, Vallarta has grown. I mean, I moved there in 2002.
Okay.
So, I mean, it was much smaller then. Sayulita grew too fast, and they were having some major infrastructure issues.
Okay.
So, like, the sewage wasn't working properly, so people were getting really sick. But also, it's just kind of how the town has developed is not my personal favorite.
Sure.
It's still beautiful and lovely, but it's just not. If I had to choose somewhere in Mexico that I've been, it would probably be there. Would be my least favorite.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if I was in Vallarta and wanted to get away for the weekend, I'd still go to Sayulita.
Sure. Were you about to say something? Yeah. So I saw maybe a little like.
I forgot one on the list of places I love. Is Merida.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. That's a really beautiful town.
Nice.
And I have not been there yet.
No.
We're going in January.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The thing about Merida is it's a great jumping off point to go see all the Mayan ruins.
Okay.
Beautiful architecture, and some of the food scene there is burgeoning. It's really amazing what's going on in Merida.
And I think also it's considered one of the safest places in North America, if I'm not mistaken.
I totally would believe that.
Yeah, I think if I'm remembering my facts right, I think it's second or third, not just in Mexico, but in all U.S. Or no, not U.S. All of North America, right?
Yeah.
So that's interesting. We haven't been there either. I know we're very much considering going to Puerto Escondido, so close to over there, maybe in January ourselves. So that's next on our little list of places to go.
Oaxaca. The place, my top favorite place is Oaxaca. I'm sorry, I should put Oaxaca on the list too.
Oaxaca City?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Not yet, no.
Oh my God. So beautiful.
Okay, down top number one, right?
The architecture is just gorgeous, lovely, beautiful, great food, and great nature around there too. There's big waterfalls.
Sure. Okay.
And naturally, there's a village that is super well known for their weaving, and we have a great friend who's a weaver now from there. The arts there are just phenomenal.
And Monte Alban, which is a pre-Hispanic archaeological site.
Okay.
It's really interesting and fun.
Nice.
One of the things I love most about Mexico is it has so much pre-Hispanic history and archaeological sites and stuff like that. And the reason I love that is that my mother worked in the pre-Hispanic section of the Denver Art Museum.
Oh, okay.
So I grew up with that just
all around.
It was all around me all the time, and I love that stuff.
Nice. Yeah, definitely. If you're a history lover, Mexico has lots to offer, tons to offer.
History here is
insane.
Yeah. It's insane.
Literally downstairs and 2 blocks away, there's there's the top of a pyramid that used to be there. It's crazy how it's all integrated into this big city.
And also the more modern Mexican history is really interesting too. The independence, the revolution, modern history. I love it.
Oh yeah, it's all here. It's all here. Definitely, if you're a history lover, definitely lots to discover for sure.
150 museums or 147. There's something like that in Mexico.
Yeah, like most. Is it most in per capita, or just most in the world as far as like in one city?
I think there's one city that has more, but this is from what I know. This
had the most. Or,
it's the most.
Yeah, again, right there. Now. So kind of sticking on that traveling vein, but maybe getting more to the logistical side. Mm-hmm. How have y'all tended to travel to these places? Do y'all purely go by plane? Have you taken bus, drive?
The buses are great, cheap, comfortable, easy, safe. Like love them.
Yeah.
So we usually go take the bus to like San Miguel.
Oh, okay.
Like, there's no reason to drive up there.
And I've driven.
I took the bus to Puebla and to Cuernavaca. I took the bus. It's very, very easy. Then the other thing that we do is Volaris.
Okay, yeah.
Has this program like for $60 a month, you get one free ticket every month. So that's what we signed up for.
Did not know that.
Yeah, you should check into it.
It's called the Deep Pass.
And that's what we're using to explore all of Mexico. So
okay. $60 a month?
Yeah, it's like 1,200 pesos a month.
Okay, and you get one free ticket a month.
Mm-hmm.
To anywhere to fly?
Anywhere, any direct flight.
Right, anywhere domestic.
Direct flights.
And
they also have a program for anywhere the Volaris flies, except you have to do it, I think 36, you have to book 36 hours before. So for us, it doesn't work.
Okay.
But we can book it on the first of every month. That's when we book our travel for the month. It's a great
weekend trip or something.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And you pay the 60 plus local airport tax.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And ours does include luggage and priority.
Well, the luggage is bad because I know a lot of times, right? You tend to see those prices, online, and you have good prices, but then it's like no luggage, right? And sometimes not even carry on, like maybe just your personal, and then you have to pay for carry on, and you got to pay for luggage.
Yeah. The 1,200 pesos that we pay a month includes a personal item and a carry on.
Okay.
And you can choose. You can have just a personal item or whatever.
You can pay more and get it and have a check bag.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. Great program.
Great. I had no idea about that, and we do have that flexibility to travel. So I need to talk when we get home. That's what we talk about.
It's really
and house sitting. That's another way to do it. If you are mobile for work or retired, there's a site called House Sit Mexico.
Okay.
And you literally register for that, and there's people all over the country, mostly foreigners, that need their homes sat for. So literally you'll be in a multi-million-dollar home in San Miguel or outside Guadalajara, in Ajijico, or wherever, and you're taking care of their cats, but you're living in this amazing home.
Yeah, that's great. You just have to feed the cats and water the plants.
And so I'm assuming there's an extensive, or at least a background check,
it's up to the homeowner to interview, but most people that are on there that are in the know, they've got references because they've done it before.
Yeah. Okay.
So I find it's mostly digital nomads. We've ever used it.
So you've used it. Y'all have done it.
We have not yet.
We're
signed up for it.
Oh, okay.
We had someone that was going to stay here in our apartment for a few weeks, but then my former business partner decided to stay, so she came. And we just haven't. This year's been so crazy for us. We haven't taken advantage of going to other people's places and staying there, but we will.
Okay. Yeah. And so just going back to the travel real quick, I want to kind of go back. How would you compare, let's say, air travel? Because I know is it just as hectic or just as bad, or better, worse than US?
It is. I would say it's a little bit more challenging here to fly.
Okay.
Now we're not talking high-end airlines. We're talking, lower end.
Viva Aerobus.
Well, Viva Aerobus. I mean, it's an Airbus. They literally call it a bus in the air, and that's what it's like, right? They're very nice. But sometimes the communication can be a little challenging. Gate changes with no announcements.
Oh, okay.
Wrong terminals you just experienced. So, I mean, there are challenges to it here, but once give yourself a little bit of extra wiggle room, and you're good.
Well, I think that goes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, when you need that little extra patience here.
Yes.
Oh yeah. But Viva Aerobus is it's a chaotic airline. Everything is just
everything they do is chaotic.
It's crazy and
So our rules for
I still fly them.
Sure.
And our rules for both Viva Aerobus and Volaris are no international and no connecting.
No connection.
You just try to do direct.
Not do connection.
Direct flights only, no connecting flights, and no international. Because they weren't designed as international airways originally, and so their training and stuff, they're not prepared, even though they're doing it for years, they're still not kind of up to speed on international regulations from like the customer experience standpoint.
They're still going through the growing pains, transitioning.
I would say that's a fair statement.
Well, and part of it is like
just don't care.
All airlines suck.
Yes.
Right? So Mexican airlines are no different than U.S. airlines. You know, they will delay your flights, cancel your flights, like strand you in some strange city. I mean, they lose your luggage. They all do that.
Our worst experience to date has been American Airlines.
American's horrible. I don't fly.
Well, you're flying out of Dallas, right? So
we had to.
Yeah.
We fly American all the time.
I only fly American if I have to go to Dallas.
Right.
If I have to.
Right.
If I don't have to fly them, I don't use them.
Yeah. I've experienced that once or twice when we went to Querétaro, because Querétaro does have direct flights from Houston and Dallas, and I don't know why we had to go through Dallas once, but it was one time, and it was just I don't know what you want to call it, feeling, just something. And I guess, I mean, to me, Delta's a little bit nicer than American, and the whole experience was, yeah.
American Airlines, one time before we moved here, we were in Mexico City, and it took us 5 days from Mexico City to get back to Dallas with canceled flights.
Oh, okay.
And they finally abandoned us in San Antonio, and the lady at American just said, just rent a car, you're close enough, just rent a car and go. Which we did. We rented a car and drove home.
To the tune of $750 because it was a one-way rental.
And then I wrote them a letter and I said, you did this wrong, this wrong, this wrong, this wrong. You didn't even get us to our destination.
Right.
Would you please refund my money? And they sent back a letter saying, basically, F you.
Long story short,
$15 or something as a reimbursement.
Or something.
Wow. That's definitely. That's an experience unto itself, I'm sure. But so now, kind of switching gears, I guess maybe we can go from renting cars to renting properties. So I know you're in the process of rehabbing a house right now. Mm-hmm. So renting this place, or is this your first place to rent in Mexico?
Yes.
Okay. And what was that process like?
It wasn't too hard.
It wasn't too hard. I mean, it's definitely different than renting in Dallas.
Sure.
It's more in line with renting in like a city like New York, where you have to show a lot more documentation. There's a thing called an aval here, which is like a guarantee. And with that guarantee, the guarantee has to be provided by a Mexican national who owns property.
Right. So did y'all know somebody?
We didn't have to do that fortunately because we went through, our landlord was going through using an insurance agency. So we actually ended up, another company did our background checks, and then
for a little insurance
we had to pay for an insurance policy that protected both them and us.
The Política Jurídica, right?
I don't know what it's called. Let's go with that.
Yeah.
But that seemed to work out really well because it didn't require us to fork over as much cash, which was nice.
Okay.
But also we're protected. It's a third party that's managing the situation. So if there were ever issues, we would be able to go to them. We're super lucky. Our landlords are amazing.
Very nice.
It's a family-owned apartment, but they actually lived in this apartment. They designed it when they first moved in. And so we basically deal with a daughter, and she's great. She's wonderful.
I would say the biggest difference in renting between the U.S. and here is, they check you out in the U.S.
Sure.
But here they really check you out. They really, they want references and bank statements and because once you get into the apartment, it's much more difficult to get you out.
True. Right. Yeah. Especially coming from Texas, where definitely landlords have a lot more rights. Here it's definitely on the flip side, right? The tenants have more rights and protection.
Now that's changed a little bit because before it was impossible for a landlord to get people out. Now the laws have changed enough that the landlords have more rights as well. And I say that just because if people are moving here and buying investment properties, which people do, that it's not as hard to get someone out as it once was. Okay. But it's still hard.
So the experience has been a little easier than you maybe anticipated?
Yeah.
Right. And how did you find the place? Was it with a realtor, yourself?
I'm a hound when it comes to real estate. So I found this apartment myself, but we were working with an agent, and I then sent it to my agent. Our agent then acted as our representative to do that.
He found it online.
I found it online.
With Immerse 24? Or?
No, I found it on a boutique website.
Okay.
Yeah.
A little bit more specialized?
They specialize in homes that are more I would say larger and more foreigner appropriate. So neighborhoods and that most foreigners want to be in.
Okay.
So they also understand the process and are able to explain the differences with that. The same agent that represented us renting this also represented us in the purchase of our home.
The purchase.
Yeah, she didn't find it. We found it, but we hired her to be our consultant. She's a dear family friend, but also she's been in the real estate game for decades. Yeah. So she really looked out for us.
Yeah, only because, we're in a foreign country. Sure. I don't know the ins and outs of buying property here. I wanted her to look at things to make sure that there was something that I wasn't picking up on.
She was a real estate coach.
Yeah, she was a real estate coach. The weird, for people who are thinking about moving here, the kind of the weird thing is in the U.S. there's MLS, the multiple listing service. They don't have MLS here. So you have to check like multiple online sites for properties. And you have to just ask your friends if they know an apartment or a house that's, for rent or for sale. And then you just got to kind of say, I want to live in this neighborhood. And you just got to walk up and down streets.
Yeah, for that.
Signs,
right.
And then call the people.
Yeah, I think one of the things we've noticed too and have heard, again, because there's no MLS and maybe no regulations are much looser here, is a lot of times places will be either sold or rented, but they'll leave them on. Right? So you'll see a place, they'll be online. So you go to the online site and you see I like this one. You go, oh no, that one house was rented 2 months ago. Yeah, but it's still there. 2 years ago. Yeah, something like that. So again, just like everything, you have to be a little patient with
Yes, you do. And here, just to clarify, there are areas in this country that do have the equivalent of a multi-list. Like Puerto Vallarta has AMP, San Miguel has a new thing, and so in Vallarta specifically, you actually have realtors that are part of the AMP and they are certified as realtors.
Okay.
Mexico City, that is not the case. Anyone can sell real estate in the city.
Right.
So it's important to have an agent that you trust. Generally, a referral is the best way to go.
Right.
And have a good attorney, both the attorney that's managing the sale of the property, the title and all of that, but then also a separate attorney that you can access if you have questions or need to have documents reviewed.
Okay.
Because legal documents in Mexico are in Spanish.
Yep.
Even if you have a Spanish and English translation, the Spanish is what counts if you ever have to go to court.
Sure.
So those are the little ins and out things that you just need to be aware of. But otherwise, it's not a horribly complicated process. It's really
it was actually in some ways kind of easier than the U.S. even.
Really?
Yeah. But we didn't do a mortgage here, so I can't tell you how the mortgage process is here. But in the U.S., when you get a mortgage, it's just like they want papers after papers after papers after papers. It's like, oh my God.
And mortgages are available here.
Yes. But higher interest.
Higher interest rates for sure. But there are two companies that I know of. One friend of mine founded 25 years ago.
Okay.
And they basically, it's a very, very similar process because a lot of times the money is actually coming from the U.S. anyway.
Right.
There are other ways to do it if you're financing your purchase here. There are a number of ways to do it that were not available not that long ago, but it is usually it's like 20% down and it's a little bit higher on the interest rates. But given your taxes are really, really low here,
very, very low,
crazy low. Your HOAs, if you're in a condo, are much lower here than they would be in the States. Ours are a third of what they were in Dallas, or less even. So there's options.
The big difference is in the U.S. you pay property taxes every year, a substantial amount every year for property taxes.
Yeah.
Here, when you buy the property, there's a really big tax bill that you pay, but then after that, that yearly tax bill is tiny.
Yeah, relatively.
So when you're budgeting, you have to figure out like the house costs X dollars. I need X dollars plus a giant amount for the taxes.
Yes. Yeah, like 20% of your purchase price.
Oh, sure.
So your closing costs, as we define them in the States, are much different than they are here.
Right. And so I guess I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself because y'all had brought it up as far as I was going to ask how y'all paid, was it financing or cash? How is it getting the cash here? What is that process like? I mean, is it pretty streamlined? Is it just
our situation was a little different
because we're Americans who bought it from Americans, and so the whole transaction cash-wise was sort of in the U.S.
So that made it a little easier.
Yeah, so you have to get taxes on the actual transfer was done, but the actual cash transfer was done in the U.S.
Okay.
Which is very, very unusual.
Yes.
So we didn't have to deal with the exchange rate so much.
Yeah.
Even though it was a peso listing, we knew how much they wanted, and we negotiated based on
US
all our
price.
expectations.
Okay.
Peso.
That's nice. I mean, in a sense, because you're right. I know when we did our transaction, it was one of those things because half a point or point can make a huge difference on how much money you're saving or losing.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. We set an alarm for ours. Like, okay, if it ever hits this price, which we're right there.
Yeah, when we got here, it was almost 22 pesos to the dollar, and then recently it's gone down to close to 15 in the middle of our renovations. And for us, it's like our renovations have shifted anywhere from 25 up to 25% difference in what it's going to cost us, depending on where the peso is going to be in the end. So that's a bit stressful.
Sure.
But you figure it out. You figure it out.
At the end of the day, and now it's kind of rebounding back up to is it still around 17s? Give or take right now.
Yeah. It's not too bad.
Right.
But are you asking about just banking here in general?
No. I was just specifically for the rent or a purchasing transaction, right?
And another thing to consider here too, depending on where you're looking in Mexico, some prices are in dollars and some prices are in pesos.
Yes.
And that's even true in Mexico City. Polanco, for example, all dollars.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
Like national buying from a national, the price is in US dollars.
Wow.
In Guatemala, which is the neighborhood we live in, is I don't know that I've ever seen a US dollar price tag. It's always been pesos.
Yeah.
So it really depends on where you are.
Okay. And so what made you all kind of make that transition from renting to, let's go ahead and pull the trigger and let's purchase here in Mexico City?
So it's an interesting Mexico story. We had planned on purchasing here, but we wanted to be here for at least a year.
Okay.
Before we started even looking. And right before about the 9-month mark, we had a cocktail party to meet more people. And one of our guests at that party had suggested inviting a friend of his who we really felt we should know.
Okay.
So this person came and we were chatting and he was in our house and said, "Hey, by the way, are you guys going to buy anything?" And we said, we are going to at some point, but we're not quite ready yet. And he goes, "Well, there's a unit in my building that you might want to take a look at."
Okay.
And he goes, "You have to use your imagination."
Sure.
And I said, "I'm a former interior designer, so I have that ability.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable looking past the junk." And we went and toured it, and it was a dump. I mean, it was in really, really bad condition. It had been there. I mean, it was someone had lived there, you could tell, for years. I mean, he lived there since 1983.
Okay.
And it was very lived in. There was nothing wrong with it. It had great bones.
Sure.
But we had to look past a lot of things. You'll see it later, what it looks like now.
Sure.
Halfway through the project. But that's how we ended up with that apartment. That's why we had no realtor.
I've heard that from lots of people. Is that's how you find apartments here or find houses to buy or whatever, is that you talk to your friends and your friends know somebody in their building.
Who knows somebody.
The old lady above them just passed away and now her apartment's available. That's how you find it.
It's very New York in that sense. Check the obituaries.
And start looking for those places.
Exactly. And for us it was this project I would not recommend for most people.
Sure.
I've done projects here before, so I understood what we were getting into. And it was the only way, even considering the renovations, that we could have the location, the size, all the boxes that we wanted except a balcony checked. It would be the only way that we could have afforded to do that.
Nice.
We would have ended up with something that was newer construction, half the size, kind of
boring.
Yeah. Not something that's historically significant in a beautiful building inside of a really great community of people.
Nice.
So we're very, very lucky, but that is the kind of quote unquote luck that happens here when you are involved with your communities.
Yeah, but also buying a place was always in the plan.
Yes.
Okay.
The plan. So and I would recommend this to anyone. I came down here a year before we moved down here. I came down here during the summer and lived here for a month and pretended I lived here to see if I would actually like living here rather than visiting.
Right.
So I had to
always very different.
Had to go to the grocery store, had to pay utilities, had to go to the drugstore, blah blah blah. Loved it. Then we moved here and rented for. The plan was to rent for a year, maybe 2 years, and then buy an apartment.
Sure.
So at the end of the year, you're going to know: do you want to stay here permanently, or do you want to go back to the U.S.?
Right.
And I knew like 2 months into it, like I'm never leaving. But it is a great idea to if you're moving here, to rent for a year first.
Right.
And the bigger issue is you have to know what neighborhood you want to live in.
True, because they all vary in the difference. Right.
They're all different.
Right.
And very different vibes. And, they say Roma Norte or the Romas and Condesa are Mexico City on training wheels.
Yeah.
Where it's like people move there and they're beautiful.
Sure, absolutely.
But you'll sit in a restaurant and everyone around you speaks English.
Right.
And that's, for us, that's not what we wanted.
Right.
So John, on his 3 to 5 hour walks, literally, he was able to really zone in on a specific neighborhood, and that neighborhood is now where we're going to be forever.
Nice.
Forever.
Yeah, and again, I think that is an important point to kind of reiterate is, what do you want, right? And again, as where are you in life? Because we looked down in this area as well. I think we looked at a place right off like Hamburg Street. But again, for us, having the sun, this wasn't the area.
Yeah. What neighborhood are you in?
Metropolis. Which is right there south of Condesa, right, and very family, very open. It's almost feels like a little suburbish, kind of, but it's perfect for what we need. Yeah, and for having a young son, there's a big park there, which is like 3 blocks away. Like, great.
You don't need a bar downstairs,
right?
Keeping you guys
thumping at night.
Exactly.
We're not going anywhere at 10 o'clock at night. It's like, let's get started. It's 11. Let's go out.
We're going to bed. Like us, we're going to bed. We're 11 o'clock, but still.
That's good. You're high enough up out of the noise, right?
Well, not really.
No.
Noise rises, let me tell you.
And so, with your rehab project, what has that process been like? I know you said maybe it's a big project, but talking about pricing and working with contractors and deadlines.
Here's I'll speak to this.
Okay.
I'll speak to this because I know how it's done in the U.S. and I know how it's done here. In the U.S., when you're remodeling a house, if you're in the financial position to hire an interior designer or an architect, you do so. The architect's job is to create your renovations or your new build or whatever, and the interior designer's job is to make it pretty on the inside, right?
Right.
Here, you hire, if you're doing a bigger project, you hire an architect.
Okay.
The architect is also your GC.
Okay.
So it's a one-stop shop. And we were super, super lucky. Our architect is an amazing man. His specialty is rehabbing historic buildings in the city.
Okay.
I can literally walk around town. I take a photo of a building. I'm like, "Is this yours?" He's like, "Yes, it is." And he studied actually under the architect that designed our building. Built it in 1955. So for him, while he usually does big buildings, this is a passion project for him as well. And the great thing about it is we didn't have to find plumbers. We didn't have to find anybody because all of these people are on his team.
Sure.
And have worked with him up to 20 years, I think, some of his people. So he really knows that they're going to do quality work. We trust him. He's going to do quality work. And so for us, I'm acting as interior designer on this project, but even then it's a lot less hands-on as it would have been in the US. So it ends up being a much smoother process when you're doing a project of a certain size. If you're DIYing it, I wish you luck.
Yeah. So having him as your GC, which is general contractor, is he able to kind of keep schedules pretty well, or is it kind of going back to like what we talked about? Sometimes things get a little delayed.
We've had some delays, but nothing
bad,
nothing weird.
So in the U.S., when you hire a general contractor to renovate your kitchen, and they tell you it's going to take 6 months and cost X dollars, what they really mean is it's going to take 1 full year and 2 times X.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's not the case here. Our architect, he said, it's going to cost X dollars and it's going to take this long. And, it's going to be off by a little bit because you can't predict what all's needed. But we're pretty much going to come in on date and on budget.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I built in a 20% increase.
Just in case.
But also knowing, he made that estimate after walking through our apartment the first time. We hadn't really discussed specifics. Like he's like, "Do you want Ritz-Carlton level finish?" And we're like, no, but we also don't want, super low end finishes.
Sure.
We want something in the middle, and I'm really specific about what I want.
Right.
And he said to me the other day, "It's been such a pleasure working with you because we'll have disagreements, but we'll actually create like, okay, here's a solution to this. Okay, great. And then we're on the same page.
Nice.
So it's perfect. It's been a really, really great process. That's not always the case here. I've heard of nightmare situations
which I've had as well.
And you have it in the States, right?
Exactly.
I mean, the same thing is true anywhere where you're working on a project like that. If you want to be totally safe, buy brand new construction that, it's turnkey.
Right.
And that's available here
There's
too.
a lot of that. Yeah.
Oh,
A lot of it. A lot of people don't want to deal with the process of renovation.
It's a pain. We've never done it here, but that was our business back home. So it's not for everybody.
No, it's not. And especially if you don't speak Spanish fluently or you don't understand the cultural differences, there's things you have to be aware of. Even working with someone like our architect who is French Mexican descent, he's been here for their family's been here for 3 generations.
Oh.
He does some of the wealthiest homes in the city. Those kinds of things. Even then, there's still like cultural moments where I have to be like, oh, I need to put my Mexico hat on and not be a jackass about this and not get demanding and not be like, you said yesterday and it's tomorrow and I haven't gotten that document yet. So you do have to be a little bit more flexible.
Right.
But it's doable.
The construction methods are different here than they are in the U.S.
Okay.
In the U.S., everything is, they call it stick built. It's like 2x4s
Right.
with sheetrock over it, brick on the exterior of the house. Here, everything is cinder block and cement.
And plaster.
Or cement with plaster. They don't use sheetrock and they don't use 2x4s.
Nope.
Brand new construction does use sheetrock.
Oh, do they? Yeah. They kind of.
We're watching these buildings go up and we're like, oh,
I'm not sure that's a good idea. Because what I was told is like every time they have an earthquake, everybody's sheetrock.
It's going to start cracking.
So are you going to replace the sheetrock in your house
every time?
2 times a year?
Right.
No.
Yeah, as soon as you said that, first thing that went through my mind is that's going to crack.
Do you have sheetrock in your house?
No. No.
Well, if you look at this apartment, I mean, the material on the inside is the exact same material that's on the outside.
Oh, right.
Which is, what is it, 11 inches of cement.
Yeah.
And steel.
Right.
This is a very solid building. It moves, but
which they're supposed to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I know you mentioned about the kind of the language barrier.
Mm-hmm.
Is your architect, is he bilingual or is it all Spanish? How has there been?
He's bilingual.
So it's been able to make it a little smoother.
Yeah.
Okay.
Our Spanish, when he's talking to workers like completely in Spanish, I can understand what he's saying to them.
Okay.
So, we have enough Spanish that we can get by.
Okay.
Yeah, I just don't like to do very specific things in Spanish, measurements, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's
or like finish it, like if I want a honed finish versus this, I may not
technical terms.
Technical terms, I prefer to do those in English,
right?
Or see samples if we're going back and forth. But with him, we don't need to go back and forth because he pretty much knows, and if he doesn't, we've sorted out very, very quickly.
There's been a few moments though where we told him like, oh, we want it to be this way, like the way that an American would want it. He just gives us this weird look like, really?
Yeah.
You were like that?
We'll show you the kitchen dining room wall that's no longer there. That was a big discussion.
Oh, I bet.
Because traditional Mexican, your kitchen, he's like, well, what if people smell the food in the dining room? I'm like, good. That's a good thing.
he's old school.
Yeah.
Mexican old school architecture.
Very divided.
The kitchen is very much like in the back and can be closed off.
Right. That's where your cook and your housekeeper are.
Right.
You shut the doors. I mean, we've got sliding doors everywhere for this kitchen too.
Oh, yeah.
So it was very, very separate. But so it's been an interesting cultural conversations as well as cultural awareness and both respecting what he believes, but also what I believe.
But on the flip side though, he's also has suggested things to us that we didn't think about.
Yeah.
We thought, oh my God,
great
that's
idea.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Great idea. It truly has been a partnership. It's been the best out of the 30 plus homes I've redone. It's the best experience I've had so far.
Oh, excellent.
Knock on wood.
Yes, somewhere on the floor. There
Knock
you
on
go. And what about your own personal Spanish? And I know you kind of touched on that. Have y'all
my
a little bit? Are y'all learning as you go?
I would say my Spanish is my comprehension is much greater than my speaking ability.
Sure.
When I lived in Vallarta, my Spanish actually got worse. It's getting better here. I have not mastered or even attempted, to be quite honest, tenses. So I pretty much speak in the current moment,
Sure.
regardless if that current moment was 2 years ago or next year. but it worked. Somehow it worked. I
Good.
want my Spanish to get better, and I will. And I have been sort of practicing a little bit, but I completely function here with very little challenge.
Sure.
Yeah.
And
I came here with high school and college grade, Spanish,
right.
which is good for like vacations or something like that, but not to live here. But now, a year and a half later, my Spanish is probably 3 or 4 times better than it was when we arrived. And the way that I'm learning is I watch TV in Spanish with Spanish subtitles.
Okay.
That's the best way.
Okay.
I read the newspaper online in Spanish. And the great thing about that is, like, when you hit a word that you don't know, you can tap on it and you get the little pop-up.
Oh, right.
It says translate. And so you get the word. So you can read the newspaper kind of almost in normal speed.
Sure.
That's a good one. And then I have a playlist of Spanish language music that I listen to when I'm at the gym or when I'm walking. So
nice.
you hear people saying things all the time.
Okay.
And then you just gotta get over your anxiety or embarrassment that you can't say things perfectly, and you just gotta talk as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, and and I think people here in Mexico in general are very happy and accepting if you try, and they're not gonna look down on you if you say something wrong. They're very I got you.
So a big moment for me where I really started feeling comfortable with Spanish was a friend of mine says, "Oh, don't worry if you can't say it perfectly or whatever." He said, "It's really cute to see you watch you struggle with it.
Yeah.
We love watching you try to say
You're trying to sweat your way through a situation."
And there's so many colloquialisms too, like living in Mexico City versus living in Vallarta. It's very, very different.
Sure.
The words that people use, or the slang, or the phrases are so, especially in Mexico, it's like the Spanish in Mexico is so, the phrases are so different here. My father was American, but grew up in Latin America, grew up in Peru and Buenos Aires, and Lima and Buenos Aires for the most part. So his Spanish was very different than Mexican Spanish, and then even more different than Mexico City Spanish.
Oh yeah.
So it is different, and in the big cities, I would say Guadalajara and Mexico City, it's much faster. It can be a challenge to follow people here. I'm now used to it, but when I would come and visit the big cities, when I lived in Vallarta, I'd be like, "What did you just say?" When you think about it, it's like someone from Louisiana going to Manhattan.
Sure.
They're like
the whole different world.
Right. So it's just different accents and different terminologies and different expressions and all that. But people are very patient, really, really patient. As long as you make an effort, people are really patient. Unlike France, where people might mock you for it.
Right.
Over here, they're very, very.
But on the other hand, I know people that live here, like my friend, who speaks no Spanish at all. Doesn't even doesn't say hello and goodbye in Spanish. And he manages.
Gets by.
So you can get by fine with zero Spanish.
I don't recommend that.
No, but he can, right?
And more, I don't recommend it, not just because it's slightly arrogant, but you really don't get to experience the country in a way that is as authentic and as real if you don't understand, even if your Spanish isn't flawless,
right?
But understanding the use of pero, which if you look at the first translation of pero is fart, but it can be used in so many different ways that to understand it, you start understanding the culture in a better, richer, deeper way. So the more Spanish you speak and the more cultural awareness you have, the richer your experience is going to be here.
Right. You don't want to just hang out. You don't want to hang out with a bunch of Americans.
No, absolutely right.
I want to have Mexican friends, and I want to speak Spanish to my Mexican friends.
And we have both.
Right.
Yeah, we have both. We have expats and that's the
so when we
thing.
have parties, our parties tend to be bilingual. They'll kind of flow into Spanish and then go back to English.
Absolutely.
So it kind of does both.
And I think that's one of the great things about Mexico City is you have the ability to do that. Have your international friends and your local friends, and they can all mix together and for a great time.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Now, one of the things you kind of threw in there was kind of comparing Mexico City to Puerto Vallarta.
Mm-hmm.
Have you been to Puerto Vallarta quite a bit?
Yeah.
Obviously there's surface level differences between Vallarta and Mexico City. What else? How would you compare? Again, because one of the things we like for our audience to understand is moving to Mexico City are differences. Yes. So obviously we got beach and city.
Yes.
Let's get that out of the way. That's obvious. were there any? How would you compare the two? I mean, culturally,
I can actually generalize
Sure.
and also speak specifically to Vallarta.
Okay.
Generally, the expat communities, may it be in Cabo or San Miguel de Allende or Vallarta, a lot of people I tend to stick to that community. They don't leave. And when I lived in Vallarta was like living on an island. You would literally get like island fever, right? And people didn't explore the rest of the country. They wouldn't even go to Guadalajara, which was a 4-hour bus ride.
Right.
So they live in these little, I shop at Costco. When I lived there, there was no Costco, but now there's a Costco, and there's the American this, and the Canadian that, and the Quebec this, and that. And so they tend to stay in their little bubble, which is perfectly fine, right?
Sure.
There's nothing wrong with that. But you live in a country that is so rich with experience and culture. Get your ass out of that space, right? And go and travel and do those kinds of things. That's why when we found out about the Volaris Pass, we're like, we are on it.
That's awesome.
Because it really makes it affordable to go and travel on a tight budget.
Yeah.
So that's really great. The communities are all super, but on the flip side, like the library in San Miguel, which has a lot of foreign support. The director is French. She's married to a Mexican guy. The foreign community really comes together and really supports that in a way that's really enriches the overall community and the culture. So I think having a balance of being engaged in your local community, wherever that is, but then also be willing to travel and explore the country. That's why you're here, not just living in a little tiny bubble.
Sure.
Specifically, the differences between Vallarta and Mexico City. It's like the difference between, I don't know, Carmel, California, and Los Angeles, right? Like one is a big city, and the other one is a smaller, more exclusive bubble, right?
Sure.
So I think they're different experiences, and you have to know what fits for you. And that's why I think I'm seeing more and more people now, and people we've met that live here that previously lived in San Miguel or previously lived in Vallarta, and were there for a year, loved it, realized there wasn't enough for them.
Sure.
They wanted more culture. They wanted more of an international experience. So they have now migrated to Mexico City. I'm thinking of 2 specific friends that have done that, and they are so much happier here, including my mother, actually. My mother lived in Vallarta for 14 years before she had a home here as well, and commuted back and forth, and now lives here full time. So it's, if you're a small town person, you're going to want to be in a smaller town. If you're a big town person, you want to be in a big town, in a big city. So that's how I would say it.
So, Americans, like, when they come down here, they always tend to go to, like, Vallarta, San Miguel, Cabo.
The coast,
and they're all beach towns, Cancun, stuff like that. To me, the big difference, and this is the same in the U.S. too, is the difference between a permanent full-time city and a tourist town.
Okay,
and in tourist towns, it's very transient. People come and go, come and go, and your whole life it's like, people are there for a year or two and then they disappear or whatever. But Mexico City, I think the people that move here are probably in it for the long term.
Very much more that sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to be here for 20 more years.
Sure.
I'm not going to move. So.
Yeah, and not to say that Mexico City, everyone that moves here is here for a long time, but you kind of know that.
Right.
When people come to Mexico City, they're like, oh, I'm doing 6 months, I'm doing 12 months, I'm on an assignment with a university or whatever. So it's more of a finite, or they have chosen this to be home forever. Right. And there's a lot of people in this town. And the same is true in Vallarta. I mean, I know people in Vallarta that have been there since the 60s. Right. And so it really depends. But I would say, just to kind of add on to what John was saying, one of the issues that I had as a younger person when I moved to Vallarta, I was in my early 30s. Vallarta was either retired people or working people. There was no one really as far as foreigners go, there was no one really in the middle. So it was a bit challenging to expand your world. Like you had your group of friends, and they're my closest friends in the world to this day, but it doesn't really expand from that because there's not as much. There are people that are there more temporarily, or they're tourists, or they're just seasonal, especially in Vallarta. Vallarta is very seasonal.
Oh, I've heard, yes.
So you get the snowbirds. Mexico City is not seasonal.
Right.
San Miguel is less seasonal than Vallarta, for example. So the community in San Miguel is more consistent throughout the year.
Right.
Vallarta, there's a lot of people that arrive on November 1st and leave April 1st. Every year. And they'll do it for 20 years.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they're just constant snowbird.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I think one of the things, we've been to Puerto Vallarta a couple of times. The last time we were there for a month. So again, it's not the whole long-term experience, maybe longer than most. But I think sometimes, because like I said, it's a tourist town, right? So you go down the same street every day and you're treated like a tourist every day. It feels like, like you're like, I've been here the last month or 2 months. Like, you don't need to try to sell me the same thing. Thing every time. Like, it's me. Like, you don't recognize me yet. Yeah. And so I would assume that could be more exaggerated the longer you stay there. Maybe you could be there 1, 2, 3 years, and maybe you kind of walk down the street and maybe you're always kind of treated like a tourist.
No.
Eventually,
when I lived in Vallarta, they knew.
Okay. After a while, it kind of fades.
Here's a little insider trick on that one. Carry a set of car keys even if you don't have a car. If you have a car key and a cell phone in your hand and you're walking down the street and you actually look like you've got proper clothes on and not that you're going to the beach, they start to recognize that you live there.
Okay. That's a little trick right there.
And you're more part of the community.
Right.
So that definitely does happen. The first time I was there was for 3 months. At the end of 3 months, I would say maybe 20% of people knew we lived there.
Okay.
But after being there for a few years, then.
That happens in Mexico City, though, and it always irritates me. Like, you'll go to a restaurant, and the waiter will say, "Well, how long are you going to be here?"
For the
rest of my life.
I live here because it's such a huge tourist town as well. But there's more people that live here, and you can
bigger pool.
It's a much bigger
the
pool.
Tourists into.
Right.
Yeah. And it depends on what neighborhood you're in too. Like if you're in Condesa Roma, they're assuming that you're digital nomad or a tourist.
Right. That's like I said, that's the kind of the safe area where people go to.
Yeah. In this neighborhood, they're more like, oh, you live here because you wouldn't be down here if it wasn't like you wouldn't know about.
Why would you be eating in this restaurant in this neighborhood?
If you didn't know, you weren't in the know. So.
Oh yeah, we learned that real quick. Speaking about restaurants, we have a little comida rápida in our neighborhood, and then the first time we went there, we enjoyed it. And it took us about 2 weeks to get back, but the lady recognized us. We're kind of recognizable in our neighborhood. Chinese wife,
exactly.
And she's like, "Oh yeah, you're here," and like, "Oh yeah, we live here now." She's like, "Oh, she was very nice and very friendly." But once they realize you live there, it's it's a different experience.
We just had that yesterday.
6'4", bald-headed white guy. Like people remember me. I do not blend in here at all.
Oh yeah, we definitely stand out a little bit more here.
Yes.
Very nice. Okay, great. Now one of the last things I want to kind of talk about was your experience. I said I know you told me y'all have been married. How long have you been married? Not married. Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe I misread or something.
No, someday we will.
Okay. Now, because this is obviously something I cannot speak to, and I have don't have that experience here. But what is the I guess I'll use the proper term, the LGBTQ experience here in Mexico City?
Oh my gosh. So Mexico.
I'm sorry. Compared to back home. Let me throw that in there.
So Mexico City, is a big city of 22 million people. So it also has a really big gay community here.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of bars, I guess, and nightclubs and things that cater to gay clientele or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Much more so than in Dallas. In Dallas, there's like, there's like 3 or 4 bars I go to routinely, and and there's probably like maybe 10 or 12 bars in town. I don't know how many gay bars there are in here.
Countless.
50 or 75.
We've never even been to most of them.
That's surprising. I would assume Dallas may have had more, but no. Wow.
No.
Okay.
The gay pride parade here every year is gigantic. The first year we went, it was like 1.2
million people
went to it.
Yeah. Wow. The demographics are very different.
And the other thing here in the U.S., there's so much, with the politics, there's so much homophobia, and I'm a little cautious to like hold his hand in public if we're in Dallas.
Back home, okay.
Just don't know what's going to happen.
Sure.
Here, you walk down the street, hold hands, and like nobody looks twice at you. It is very not homophobic here.
Yes, I will caveat that to the same thing when you're talking about security.
Sure.
In the neighborhoods that we live in, operate in, shop in, dine in, etc., it's
much more accepted.
No issue whatsoever. I had this exact conversation with a Mexican friend the other night who lives in this neighborhood. that grew up in Acapulco.
Okay.
And, if you get outside of the city, you get outside of this bubble, then there are issues, right? It's still a Catholic country.
Right.
We have friends that have been together for 7 years that the other families don't know they're a couple, right? So that type of thing does still exist here.
Sure.
But it's much less. And honestly, walking down the street here, you'll see 2 women walking down the street holding hands. You'll see 2 men walking down the street. You'll see trans people. And it's just much more integrated. You don't even get, because I look for it. I always look to see if someone's getting the side eye.
Oh, right.
You're getting that look. I've had one experience in 18 months where I saw a shoe shine guy looking at 2 young, very, very queer guys.
Right.
One of them had heels on, and he did give kind of this judgmental, snotty look. But everybody else
couldn't care less.
I also think that Mexicans are kind of more tolerant of eccentric people. So when you walk around, I'll see some really weird looking people in weird costumes or doing weird things or whatever, and people just kind of they're like, cool,
do your thing. It's I think it's much, especially in the city centers, it's much more acceptable. It's part of life. That said, I think the city is moving much faster in the progression of acceptance. So still, you have the older generation that's a little bit more conservative and a little bit more concerning. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and his prior partner that he'd been together with for 15 years, who happened to be a very successful international lawyer, he was accepted at any dinner party.
Sure.
Now that he's single, an invitation is not extended for him plus a date. It's just for him now.
Right.
And even someone he's dating is not invited to Christmas dinner.
Oh.
Because it's, it's the family is more conservative.
Sure.
So really, it does depend. But as a general day-to-day existence in the city, it's nothing. It means nothing. I feel completely safe being a gay man here.
Nice.
I don't have a problem kissing him on the street, making out. I think that's inappropriate anyway.
Sure.
Right?
No matter
who you are.
Gay, straight, doesn't matter.
But I feel totally comfortable here. I've never felt any prejudice. I've never felt looked down upon or any of the things. I mean, in Texas, the minute you leave Dallas or Houston or Austin, you get out into the country, 45 minutes outside the city, and I'm like, I get side eye all the time.
No.
All the time.
And in the U.S., the politics is that, there's one party that is openly, aggressively homophobic, and is trying to impose that homophobia in the law and all over the country. Here, I don't know that there's any political movement that to try to demonize gay people. Or
no, in fact, the opposite. I mean, they have federal programs to help people who don't understand, the younger generations, to understand who they are and what's important to them. I mean, that's sponsored by the government. There's training programs, there's videos, there's all those kinds of things.
They have big programs to teach people to not be homophobic.
And that was actually one of my questions.
On a federal level.
2 questions that you've kind of answered a little bit. I'll stick to that one first and come back to the other one. Was kind of politically, what is the view of the LGBT community here in Mexico, right?
It's much more inclusive with all parties.
And it's just doesn't seem to be a political issue
at all.
Nobody's trying to score points off being more homophobic.
Sure.
You're not using it's not used as a pawn like it is in the States.
Yeah. Okay. And then something else, y'all had kind of touched on was before you moved here. Right, were there any concerns? Kind of given that Mexico is a more conservative, culture.
I didn't have any because I've lived here before.
Right.
The only time I've ever had any homophobic experiences were from actually Canadians. The weirdest thing.
Yeah.
In a neighborhood in Vallarta, it was kind of like, what are you doing in this neighborhood, giving me shit for holding my partner's hand? So no, I mean, to me, it was I had no concerns about that whatsoever. But I had experiences to know that there wasn't going to be an issue based on where we were living.
Yeah. I wasn't worried about that.
Okay.
No, not at all.
But mostly because of previous visits to Mexico, where I never saw or experienced anything bad.
Right. Well, I think y'all have a little bit of a different experiences. Y'all had been here multiple times before, so y'all kind of knew what to expect. I think sometimes when I do interview people, they may have only been here for a few months, a few years, and so their first time moving here was their first time here. So I think there's a lot more preconceived notions if it's your first time. You all have the experience.
Yeah.
So I think it kind of helped kind of
I
fill
have
those.
noticed it when traveling, like now that you mention that, this was many, many years ago. I remember checking into a hotel in Guadalajara, and I was with my partner at the time who's Mexican, and we, they get the normal question, would you like, I'm assuming you would like 2 twin beds. And we said, no, 1 bed. And they're like, why? But do we really need to go into it? Oh, okay. I got it. So it wasn't aggressive. It was just completely
oblivious.
And so I've never really run into an issue anywhere. I mean, when you introduce someone as your partner, they just go, okay, great, good for you. Have a nice day.
Now, something else I want to kind of, touch on was, and again, I don't want to make this too much PV in Mexico City because I understand they're different. But I think one of the things people who understand Mexico a little bit, I think understand PV does have a very vibrant, gay culture.
Oh, huge.
Right?
Yeah.
So how would maybe if there's someone out there who's maybe considering the two, again, understanding that they're different, but just looking at the community, would you describe them the same, similar?
I think they're different, and here's how I think they're different. Because Vallarta has changed. The gay man that's moving, or the queer person that is moving to Vallarta today, is very different than the queer person that was moving there 25, 30 years ago.
Okay.
They're looking for 2 different things. Vallarta is extremely welcoming. Vallarta has a very conservative side too, which people don't know about. And when those conservative people started making millions of dollars off the gay community, they suddenly changed their tune. However, it's just different.
Sure.
I think Vallarta, most people move to Vallarta when they are either wanting more freedom if they're younger, so they're working online. Older people are there to retire. It's a very comfortable place to do that.
Yeah.
There's not a lot to do. Like Vallarta is a party town.
Right.
It is a gay mecca for Latin America, not just Mexico. For Latin America, people fly there.
Okay.
Well, actually, all of North America. I mean, It's Provincetown, Palm Springs, and Vallarta. I mean, literally, and people hop between the 3.
I would say that Vallarta is like one of the biggest, most active gay cities on the planet.
On the planet.
I think it definitely has that little reputation.
Yeah. And
it
caters to the queer community in many ways. It is more gay than lesbian, but although I've got a ton of lesbian friends that live in Vallarta. So, they're just looking for different places. To me, Vallarta it's not as sophisticated as Mexico City is, and therefore it's going to attract different kinds of people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Mexico City in itself, so again, if somebody were considering moving here, in the LGBT community, are there certain neighborhoods that again are more accepting? I know you talked about yours.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't say accepting per se. I would say more of.
Yeah. Sure.
So Zona Rosa, which is just across the road, literally, the tip of it's right here.
Juarez.
I'm sorry, in the
Colonia Juarez.
Zona Rosa is in Juarez, which is predominantly gay and Korean.
Yeah.
But also the gay neighborhoods here would be like Juarez, Roma, Condesa, Cuauhtémoc, San Rafael, which is this neighborhood, is fairly gay.
Okay.
Polanco is, but Polanco's with for wealthier corporate level gay and lesbian and queer people. I would say Zona Rosa and Juarez are definitely queer friendly of all socioeconomic levels.
Okay.
Tabacalera over here has, the younger queer community can't afford over there now, so now they're moving over there. So it's just like any city. It moves around. But there's really a space for anyone, and that's why I think it's so important to choose your neighborhood. Like the reason we're in our neighborhood, part of the reason we're in Cuauhtémoc is because it's a very mixed neighborhood. There's gay people, there's straight people, there's everything under the sun there. But it tends to be more on the professional level. People that are more established, partners that have been together for more years. It's not the party zone that you would have in Zona Rosa.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Green, for the most part.
Juarez, Zona Rosa for single people. Cuauhtémoc for couples.
Oh, okay.
Kind of, yeah. And just kind of as you get older, you kind of move over there, So it depends. We have gay couples, friends that live there as middle-aged gay couples, but it's more of a party zone. So it's more kind of what kind of neighborhood do you want to live in But as a member of the queer community, there are so many options, and really you can live wherever you want.
Right.
It's not that even Lomas has gay couples in their big mansions.
Sure.
It just really depends on what kind of neighborhood you want to be in, rather than your orientation.
Right. And that's, so I guess that was going to be my last point, was I think what it sounds like is just pretty much any of the places we've talked about before for any foreigner who may be considering moving to Mexico City seem to be kind of those friendly areas, right? For the most part.
Yeah.
Great. I appreciate the time, and everything that, we've learned. Now, before we wrap up, I always like to ask, and this is just more in general, would there be any parting advice you would want to give to anybody who may be considering moving to Mexico or Mexico City?
First of all, do it. Get off your ass.
You will not regret it.
Even if you come and you spend a year here and you decide it's not for you for whatever reason, it's a memory that you'll have for a lifetime, and it will be an experience that you'll cherish. I think that's my big piece of advice. Don't be scared. Just do it. Do it.
Yeah, for sure. The one point that I was going to touch on earlier was about the banking or whatever.
Oh, okay.
So, if you get to keep a U.S. bank account or whatever, there's like certain banks that you have to. Charles Schwab is great for foreigners because they don't charge you ATM. Like if they have an ATM fee here, they refund it. And they're really good about saying wire transfers to foreign countries and stuff like that. There's also a bank here called Intercam, which is specifically designed to provide banking services to foreigners. It's on their logo. It's the bank for foreigners or something.
And so what services do they give that kind of make it more?
Checking and wire transfers and savings accounts.
They just make it easier to. And it was started in Puerto Vallarta, or Cancun actually, but it was started by a very prominent family in Vallarta. And they started it because the wife was American and the husband was Mexican, but he was Mexican-American, so they were back and forth. And at the time, it was really hard to move money back and forth.
Yeah.
Now it's much easier. It's much easier to bank here than it used to be. But they've kind of created that niche. And so there's in every gringo community, there's an Intercam. There's one in San Miguel, right? In Zocalo. They're all over the country. And they tend to have, they don't in Mexico City, but in other places, they tend to have staff that are bilingual. They can answer questions that may not normally come up in a normal Mexican bank, like Amex or wherever. So there are options here. Navigating the banking system here can be a little bit more challenging until you figure out what you do. And then once you figure out what works for you, because it's different for everybody, then stick with it. Don't change it. Don't bank hop, because it's just going to create craziness in your life.
More issues.
So I have all my bank accounts were with Chase Bank in the U.S. And Chase won't tell you this specifically, but after about a year, I figured out, they don't want to service an account for someone who doesn't live in the U.S. So I would charge something to my debit card, and they would be declined, and I get this note like, fraud warning. This might be a fraudulent transaction because it's in Mexico.
Right.
And the hardest part was they absolutely would not, under any circumstance, wire money for me from the U.S. to Mexico.
Without $1,000.
Not going to happen.
Where with Charles Schwab, they are specifically designed for international investors. So you're not getting the security walls that Chase has up. So it really depends on the bank that you're working with in the States, but I'd recommend everyone move to Charles Schwab. At least have an account with Charles Schwab. Because specifically, they make transfers easy, they make withdrawals easy. Like you can actually live here without having a Mexican bank account if you're with Charles Schwab. I don't recommend that per se. Having a national account is.
I have an account at Intercam. And I have an account at BBVA, which I don't like, and Schwab. And the one I use 99% of the time is the Schwab.
And it actually gets the best international transfer rates.
Yes, and they also have good exchange rates too.
It's good to know. Because I'm with Chase, and I've heard a lot of people talk about Schwab, but never specifically why. They say, go Schwab.
If you live here long enough, you're going to get rid of Chase. I guarantee
Chase is a nightmare.
Sure. Our transfers, I'm trying to think.
Have you wire transfer money for the US?
I'm trying to think if we did it through Chase or we did it through Wise. I think we did it through Wise. But that was a pain in the ass too, because they only allow so much. So,
Yes.
and it was for the purchase of a house. We had to kind of do it in chunks.
Increments when you're buying a house.
Right.
This is not.
Right.
This is not easy.
But I think it still came out less. I think the reason we did it that way, if I'm not mistaken, was because it was still going to be less than if you went through just directly to Chase, I think.
And the only thing I would add to that too is that Monex and other transfer companies, when you are making any big purchases, as you experience, it makes you have to shop and negotiate. Just because they have a listed price of 17.24 pesos that day,
Yeah.
you call the broker and say, look, I'm about to transfer X number of hundreds of thousands of dollars because I'm buying a house.
Right.
I want a better rate. Guess what? They're going to come back at a better rate with you because they're going to make their money even if they give you, if they max out. So for them, it's for when you're transferring money,
And especially large amounts, right? And again, a couple of points, quarter point, and make big differences.
Yeah. And then same thing when you're getting cash out. Look at the ATM fees in different banks and see, like, some banks will give you horrible exchange rates and then charge you 8% on top of it and all that. So there's lots of little tricks.
And decline the conversion. That's the one we always learn.
Decline the conversion.
Right. If you're taking money out with a US ATM.
Do you do that and it actually works?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I've read that, and I tried it with like the 3 or 4 different banks around here. When you hit decline conversion, that you're declining the entire ATM transaction.
I've never had that. Normally when I do that, I found Banorte, they charge less. Banorte and
City Banamex, I usually find gets better,
but also
decent rates.
And you do the decline thing with
Banorte, yeah. And I've never had an issue. Really, never had an issue once.
Really?
Yeah, ever.
I'm gonna have to try again.
Okay.
Well, on that note,
Well, again, I mean, I do appreciate the time. That was good advice, and I'm glad you brought that back up and circled back around that.
And the other bigger thing is, like, if somebody's thinking about moving here, if you know somebody here, or when you get here, ask people, like, where do you bank? What do you do for insurance? Like, do you have a car? Like, you just ask people. The other foreigners are very glad to help you figure it out.
Yes.
Oh yeah. No, that's perfect. I mean, that's great advice. Thanks for the time. And I don't know, any last things you want to add, but Zac, John, we do appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah,
so again, and if y'all have any questions for me or for Zac and John, again, feel free to leave any comments down there. We can get them to them. Maybe any of us can help out. We appreciate you spending time with us, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.